Hello, hello, friends. Happy New Year, and it's good to be back. And I'm really excited, actually, to talk with my guest today. We're going to cover some really cool information. Those of you who know me know I've done a lot of work in the arena of, let's say, rehabilitation, movement, memory, cognition, multitasking, whatever. People with movement disorders. There's a lot of Parkinson's out there. It seems to be the most that I work with. I'm always looking for people who are doing things that are they're leaders in the field. And I have a leader in the field with me today as a guest. And rather than me telling you what she does, I'm going to have her tell you what she does. But before we do, she is the founder and CEO of Step and Connect. This is a research-driven, privately held company producing medical devices, exercise-related educational programs, and training systems to improve balance, and so much more. So I'd like to introduce my very special guest, Erica DeMarch. Erica, welcome to my program. It's really good to see you, to meet you. You're doing the best work. I love it. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Carl. I thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm excited to be here today and kind of talk about my passion on balance. So I also have a neuro rehab background. I'm a physical therapist for basically 20 years now, and have been working with basically people with Parkinson's. Started at grad school. So I went to Boston University, and I had the opportunity to work with Terry Ellis and worked on an exercise community-based program. So it was
Terry Ellis?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but Terry Ellis is an icon and a legend. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, she got my passion, her spunk and how she lectures. And I got to work with her in her exercise class when I was a student. And the dean of our program happened to be Dutch and had the same exact, they were researching the same program we were doing at BU, they were doing in the Netherlands. So as a grad student, I got to do some research and work in the Netherlands. And so I got to do that same research project of working with people in a community-based program, but this was in the hospital, but then also got to look at Project Rescue, which it was looking at cueing for people with Parkinson's. So it was, I think, Belgium, England, and Holland, and they were looking at different types of cueing. So that's kind of where my passion for Parkinson's started, looking at how do we cue differently? Does, rhythmic cueing with music, does visual cues, auditory cues, what works, what doesn't work, what is the retention? All of that kind of started my passion for it, and looking that, as a physical therapist, I can work in the clinic, but also looking at wellness programs and looking at in the community for exercise. So that started my passion. And then I continued to work. I moved to Denver about 10 years ago. I lived in New York City, worked at a hospital, worked at New York Presbyterian, also did a lot of work for neuro rehab there. And then when I was here, I worked at a vestibular clinic. And one thing that I noticed, I think the majority of us kind of think about our visual system. So for Parkinson's, I was having people step to a line or to laser to take a bigger step. But what I noticed was I was working at a vestibular clinic and I was trying to take away their visual system because they over-relied on it to activate their vestibular system. But meanwhile, I was up-training it for some of my clients with Parkinson's because I kept telling them to step to the line. And then their head was down and then their posture was forward. And I'm like, this is not what I want. So I started to play around with different textures. So can they feel a texture? Can they hear the sound? And started to study. For movement, we want both the spatial and the temporal parameters of movement, right? We want to work on the speed, the rhythm, the symmetry, and then we also want to work on the size of our movements. So how do we cue that to make people move better? And that's kind of how I started creating my Balance Matter system, looking at different textures, playing around with different sounds and things like that to get people to move differently.
Well, I love it. I love it. So actually, I ordered whatever the top of the line kit is that you have. It's not arrived yet. I know it's coming soon. I thought about maybe waiting to do this until I tried it out, but we'll talk again in a few months, or a few weeks. I just wanted to have you on soon because I think one of the things that's frustrated me the most, and this is, Parkinson's or not, is that we have, I'm not the best cuer in the world. Let me put it that way first. I'm not bad, but I'm not great. The two therapists I have with me, Emily and Teresa, much, much better than I am. So I'm copying them a lot. But even as good as they are, and they're really good, there's only so far that a verbal cue goes unless you have permission. You're able, just a slight touch here or there, maybe touch their shoulder blade and they stand up straighter. But how long will that last? The visual cueing I find can be very, very helpful. I have a ladder taped onto my floor now rather than laying one out. And I go back and forth between if I like it or not. But bottom line is they can go for the rungs or the space between the rungs as a visual cue. The problem is they're looking down the whole time, right? And we need to be safe. We need to look down to some degree, but that's really not how we optimally, we don't want to move this way all the time, because when we're looking down, our posture is forward and then our movement is compromised. Steps are shorter and all this other stuff. So what I've been really frustrated with, but I'm also very excited about Step and Connect arriving here, is that we can use other ways to cue. The laser lights can be great visual cues. Sound, that I've only known one other thing that, well, other than rhythm and music, and I was a drummer for a career for 35 years, so I relate to that very well. But all of this stuff only goes so far. But when you put it all together, especially if it's an interactive experience, like what you have behind you on the wall there, you have the pads. Can you explain to us what went into this? How did you, well, you sort of already said a little bit about it, but explain a little deeper maybe about this whole thing about, we have visual, but we have vestibular, we have audio, and we have feel, sensory input of the feeling of the surface beneath us. And like, this is like maximum stimulation simultaneously. Bingo. It seems like we might get some more retention out of this, perhaps, once they're off the mat.
Yeah, so if you look at the science between using, they say, if you look at the research, it's either multisensory or multimodal. If you look up those words for feedback, it processes faster, and it also does retain longer. If you look at just research studies, when you think about just intrinsically how we use feedback, like exactly what you said, is we could feel the ground, we can hear our steps, that we take all of that in if nothing's wrong with us, right? If there's, but if something is impaired, so maybe we have a neuropathy, or we don't feel correctly under our feet, we need that augmented feedback to help improve that. So, you look at intrinsic feedback of what we intrinsically just do inside of us, and then if we don't have that, how do we augment? So when I look at visual feedback, I use visual feedback a lot. I'm not saying that visual feedback is wrong when I was saying about the lasers or.
Oh, no, I know that. But it's just one avenue, right?
Exactly. It's one avenue. And if you look at I love reading research and figuring out how to apply that to the clinic. Visual feedback is really good for acquisition of a skill. So I was a tennis player. If I'm learning a new grip, I like to look to see what is my hand doing at first, right? But eventually I have to feel and be able to just get into that grip, right? So the same thing, that acquisition of a skill, learning something new, you weren't even aware that you did that. I have so many clients who they don't even know that their foot turns out, or they don't even know, that they're taking small steps. Some do know that and have that feeling where somebody pointed it out. So visual feedback is really good for acquisition of skill. You see it right away. So their performance right away is good, but their retention when they take away the visual feedback isn't always there. So then how do we retain? What I've been looking at and wanting to research and look in more is our proprioception. So if we know where we are in space, right? So that's where I still train someone to step at the pads. So I'll show the pads in a moment of if I take a step, look down, figure out, because our proprioception, or stepping over an obstacle, right? We use our visual system and our sense of how big of a step I need to take, how high of a step, they kind of work together. But one of a neurooptometrist, Dr. Politzer, I have a podcast that we spoke about it briefly, our last conversation. One thing I think is really important is, where is your end gaze? So when I started to do gait assessment,
I'm sorry to interrupt. End gaze. Yeah. Oh, wow.
So think about it like you walk with someone, or a clinician is walking with you. If you, have somebody analyzing your gait, Especially if there's a safety issue. I'm always next to my client, right, to make sure
Sure.
that they're safe. So
Mhm.
sometimes I'm not watching what their eyes are doing. So are their eyes stuck on the ground? Are their eyes moving up and down? Are they looking straight ahead? Because if I'm here, I don't see anything else. I can't anticipate that
Yeah.
obstacle far away. So looking at end stable. So anytime I do if anyone's looking down or if they're looking at the pads, the next exercise is always going to be something straight ahead. I want their final gaze always to be straight ahead and training that. So when I'm training proprioception though, and that's our body position or sense, then I'm training with the tactile, the auditory, not having them to look, see, can they hit that target over and over again? So it's similar with the, if you use the laser, if they had it on their head, if you look at cervical genic dizziness, I worked at a vestibular clinic, they get the laser, they turn their head, they get back to the middle, then they close their eyes. Can they repeat it without that visual feedback? Because at first you want to see the visual, oh, I'm missing it every time. Oop, now I have to go a little left or right. So it's the same with feeling a different, something behind me, especially think of people who are all the research on backward walking or stepping. If I can touch that target, am I too short? Am I too long? Am I rotated my foot? I have some clients, I'll show you, when they step back, their toes are turned so far out, they have no idea where to move their foot. They keep turning it out further and further versus getting it straight because they don't know where they are in space. So that's where, depending on the exercise or what you're training, and that's what really drove me to invent this, is if you are training the vestibular system, then I use these foam foot pads. Here I take away the somatosensory system, and now they can't feel the ground. So they're almost like they're floating on something. So think of like the RX pads or something that you can't feel. You take away those somatosensory, those receptors on the bottom of your feet, and now you need to use your head reference or your visual system. You close your eyes, start turning your head. Now it's only your vestibular system. What I find is different, and I made these in a foot shape, or like basically like a foot, is you can change and progress. So some of my clients, when I told them to do an exercise and they maybe had limited insurance or they couldn't have many visits with me, their home exercise program was so important, right? So they might have started with I told them to bring their feet together, close their eyes, and do some head turns, a basic vestibular exercise. They would show me the following week what they were doing, and their feet were wide apart the entire time. So they basically put all this time and energy, and it wasn't the best exercise for them. They weren't challenging themselves. If you look at neuroplasticity principles, we want the right challenge to make changes.
Yeah.
So so here I could tell somebody, I want you here, and I take a picture. I worked with someone in the clinic yesterday. She took pictures. She has a home mat system that she comes to see me every month. I update her program and give her some exercises, and then she continues to progress her exercises. So she might start here, then here, then here, then here, or maybe here, then a further step. So how do you progress and show progress? Because there's lines on the mat that they can see how big of a step they're taking, how wide their feet are, how narrow, depending on the exercise, versus just doing a balance exercise. It could be more specific based on their needs.
Yeah. I love that. So let's digress for one moment. It's still a parallel though. You mentioned neuroplasticity principles. I think it's really important people realize, yes, we want the right challenge. We want to learn things the proper way, the best way, the optimal way, rather than practicing something over and over and having our new neural firing patterns be ones that cause us to repeat something that's not right. So that's where your expertise and coaching would come in on this, or other professionals out there who can help. And the consistency of it is so important too. We do home exercise assignments here as well.
Yeah.
Because consistency is like just the key to developing the new ability and then progressing from there. So I want to ask you, because I have about 25 questions. What I'll say first, though, is if anybody here on Zoom has any questions, please open up the chat box and ask away. If you're on Facebook and you have questions for Erica, comment, because I'm watching both. I see Ted, you're here. Ted, you and I need to talk soon because I've got two really cool things for you, and this is the main one right here. When it arrives, you come see me. Okay, so hope you don't mind I said that, Ted. So let's go into something I find interesting, and I'm just going to put it out there. I have no intention of why I'm saying this, but I just find it interesting. Maybe you can comment on this. Have you ever noticed in just typical cueing without anything other than me as a person cueing them to do whatever, verbal cues, or maybe a slight, a touch here or there, a physical cue. But I find it interesting that we could have a 100% clear pathway. Maybe it's a home visit. We do some home visits here too, right? So long hallway, absolutely nothing this gentleman could possibly trip on, nothing. And they're still looking down. I know it's a habit.
Yeah.
Is obviously Step and Connect is something that we can use to help improve this, but what are your thoughts on this? How have you dealt with this in the past? I'm sure you've run into this probably a lot.
Yeah. So I think two things, like you said, a habit, a fear. If you look, balance is so complex. Did someone trip over something before? I have a lot of clients that happened, that they trip over something and now they're so fearful of that they're going to look down to make sure they don't trip over something again. Yep. So I had a length conversation with this neurooptometrist about why do we put our whole head down versus just our eyes scanning. Certain diseases, we actually don't. My dog is actually stuck in here. It's going to start barking. This is the hard thing. I'm going to let him out or you're going to hear a lot of barking for a moment.
No,
sorry.
No problem.
But I apologize. He was stuck in here. We shut the door. But I think so one would be, is it a habit? Can you actually scan? So I've been actually doing a lot of visual exercises. Can you look down and look straight ahead, look to the right? So all my classes for people with Parkinson's or any balance, I incorporate the eyes. Because if you can't look down, you have to move your head to look down, right? So first, doing a screen of looking at what I call saccades or smooth pursuits, I always screen what the eyes can do. Because if your eyes can't scan downwards to look, you're going to move your head. So I always rule that out to make sure that someone's eyes can move. But if their head is down, like you said, you can't use your vestibular system. A lot of times it's the proprioception to be able to see what their feet are doing, right? So if I know where my foot is, I can see it. And that's why backwards walking is starting to be so much, because you don't see what your feet are doing behind you. It's the same with arm swing. I watch people swing their arms. And if you look at you should see the retro, the back and forward, it should be like a pendulum, but people are using their visual system and just moving their arms forward because they can see what their arms are doing in front of them. They can't see what's behind them. So using your visual system helps you drive that movement pattern. So I think looking at how can you, and we did this a little bit in research, I do this in the clinic, can someone feel where they are? So, when I teach a course, people even want to try right now, like standing up, if you had your foot and hit different targets, can you hit there and know where it is? Or do you miss it every time because you don't know where your foot is? Is it at the ankle? Is it proprioception at the hip? So there's ways to kind of start teasing out, is it a visual problem? Is it a proprioception problem? And then you can start training that and use my system or different exercises for that. So I don't know if that answered your question fully.
No, I did. It does. It does. And plus, as we know, the brain's job is really to keep us safe. So if we've learned something or had an experience that's ingrained in there, like we fell, maybe just tripped over our feet, then you're probably watching your feet, even if the pathway's clear and it's clear. Interesting.
And one thing, I'm sorry, Carl, to kind of elaborate that, and there's some Lisa Alcock, I think she's in, she does some research, and I talked to her a little bit about that minimal toe clearance. That person worried about their foot catching. I hear so many clients, I'm worried about my foot catching. Mm-hmm. There is a strong relationship of your foot minimal toe clearance with step length. So if I tell my clients, and this is where my system is trying to improve step length, right? So if somebody can take a bigger step and be stable, control their center of mass, they're going to have a better foot clearance versus a small step. So working on that and showing the research and the self-efficacy that there is this correlation. We want to improve your step length. Another client I worked with yesterday who had dystonia in her feet. I did a video.
Like the foot clench,
her foot curled like that. Yep. So we did all these exercises to get her somatosensory system in. And when I asked her to walk as fast as she can instead of taking a bigger step, which is more efficient, she took a bunch of little steps and then her feet started to curl even more. So how do we look at that relationship of speed, step length, looking at stability and how that all works?
Yeah, interesting. I have so many avenues I could go. So let's talk. So you brought up something that yeah, I think I might have known about it, but I'm so glad to talk with you because there are things that are coming into my mind that a couple things I forgot about. For example, I mean, one of the old, I'm an NASM master trainer and all that, whatever. But one of the exercises they'll have people do for balance is, let's say, a single leg. So you're standing, let's say, left leg, you're reaching forward, lateral, and then maybe 45. You're reaching down to 4 o'clock, 4:30. So and the idea is to go equidistant with each, if possible, if your joint allows you to, if you have full range of motion or close to it. That sort of now reminds me that's not just important for the balance that you're standing on that left foot, and then of course vice versa, other side, but the fact that you do go, you know where you're going. You could have targets there and not use vision and try to touch the target.
Yep. So
I don't know. I'm
exactly.
just commenting here because it just made me realize it's a whole set of things I can do with people that, thank you very much. I'm going to do them.
Well, that's the first, I always tell people the first point of an exercise, if you use your visual system, so many people even stare at a point, right? I have so many people who the only way they can balance is staring at a point. I still remember a student who worked with me who was a yoga instructor who told me that when I was walking in front of my clients, I was changing the visual flow and their balance is going to be worse. I'm like, I'm doing that on purpose. This is real life. We can't just stare at a point. So I tell my clients the first point, yes, you could stare at a point to get you in that position, but then you have to start moving your eyes. Then you have to start moving your head. Then you have to start closing your eyes. You have to keep progressing to whatever that movement. So the same with tapping your foot. I do that. There's an exercise, I think I have it on Facebook or Instagram, that I showed like tapping around. I use the clock yourself app. So then it would be random. So I use a lot of motor learning principles. So first, if I knew around the clock, that's a lot easier for me to feel because I start getting used to, block practice of going around and touching these different targets. Then I'm closing my eyes and doing it. Then you start doing random, like 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, so adding those principles into movement will get people to succeed a lot more than just pushing it all at once at them.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let me ask you this for people who are watching. Do you use your mat, your Step and Connect, do you use that barefoot?
So it depends on the client and what you're working on. So if you're working the vestibular system and you're on the foam pads, there's no need to have them barefoot, right? Because
that makes sense.
If you're working, and I'll pull one of them, if you, so there's different textures. So if you're working on, this is a textured foot pad, there's a lot of research on just standing on textured surfaces for sweat.
Absolutely, yes.
So if you're working on the textured part and somebody has a neuropathy, I highly recommend to put it on there. If somebody, I do this in my group exercise classes for Parkinsons. Sometimes we'll do shoes off, sometimes we'll do shoes on just because they're doing a circuit and by the time it'll take too long for everyone to take their shoes off and off going back and forth. So it depends on what you're working on. There's a lot of good exercises also standing on 2 different surfaces. Sensory reweighting is actually, it's a lot more difficult than it seems, but having 1 foot on this and 1 foot on this, and your body has to figure out what I'm on and keep switching from one surface to another, looking at that speed is all sensory reweighting that you can also do to challenge somebody. But here is the clicker is in the back.
Yeah, I love that.
This one is in the front. So usually even I start a lot of my courses teaching people like just marching in place, getting used to, so this is the walnut, but if you stood here, I think you guys can see at least my feet here.
We can see.
Like getting used to even this weight shift, so I can close my eyes right now and feel the activation of the back clicker. Then I can feel the front clicker, feel where it is, feel that back. Do I do this and not know where my foot is and have to figure out that's where my foot is? So having even, you could stand up right now and try to march in place. Do you start marching forward? Do you start turning when you march? Or can you stay and figure out, this is my heel? I do a lot of rocking. If you're in a stance position, I could say each of these strips are 6 inches apart. So I can say how wide or how narrow I want someone's stance and have them rocking back and forth. So you can then have them taking a step and then stepping to another one if I place them. So there's all different configurations that you can do. And then even sit, you know, if you have a client who's getting up from you know, so say you're here, you can go hands here and out. You can get them ready to put that weight to stand up, come down and up. So tons of creativity once you know what you're working on and relate it to their goal. You can have fun with it.
This is like total genius.
I don't know about totally genius.
No, it is,
but,
seriously.
my goal is to help people figure out
I
their
deem it
movement
genius.
patterns.
Therefore, it is official. Seriously, I love this because I never seen anything like it. Okay,
and I can't wait for you, Carl, to use it because your rhythm. So I have a drummer in my class and I've had so much fun with him. So we did one drill in our class when we were live. We're still doing virtual now because of everything. But they have 2 mats and they face each other, or you could do 1 mat, the length each side facing, and you can do a rhythm. So you could do a sequence and patterns, you know, so if you look at the complexity of memory, I can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, back and forth. Wow. And each person can kind of build on that rhythm. But he did all these rhythms with the ground and this kind of stuff, and it was just fun. So you can make different rhythms, see if you're equal and symmetric left and right, or, you know, I have a lot of people who look like they're galloping because they can't have that equal left, right. Yeah. So they can make different sounds, things like that, looking at symmetry of movement.
I love it. I'll do some polyrhythms on it too.
Yeah, I can't wait for you to try
kind of rhythms.
And that I don't know all. I'm working, like I said, with a music therapist to help me with some of that, but and eventually we'll have different pitches and stuff as we get more sophisticated with some of our sounds. But I think learning how you move and listening, think of jump rope. If you ever jump roped, when you hear that whip, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got it. You got that rhythm because you're hearing that whip. It's the same thing. You start hearing that left, right, and that sound, then you like, it kind of, you know that you have that rhythm going of whatever exercise or movement you're doing.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I find, used to find it super frustrating, but that was back years ago. Now I find it more interesting. And I say this with no disrespect at all, just it's a matter of fact. Some people have absolutely no rhythm. So just so they know, it is for almost anyone, as far as I know, it like pretty much everyone, they can learn rhythm. How? Well, I don't know how to teach it, but a musician friend of mine in Germany, I was interviewing him last year, and he talked about a thing called taketina. You go to, it's like Take Tina, TAKE Tina, TINA.com. Just go there, check it out, because that's a whole program on learning rhythm. And I didn't know there was such a great program out there. But what's really cool is I've had a couple of people go there and do that, going online and doing it. And then they'll come back or we'll work on things together. And it actually has helped their stride because they didn't realize they had a shuffly step. You know, I could have the metronome going at whatever it is, you know, they're not going to step with it because they don't feel it. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can develop that. Again, I don't know how to teach it, but Taketina does. So it's a really interesting thing. The other thing too is this 2 different surfaces. I don't know why I never thought about that. You know, I used to teach for a podiatrist who, you know, I traveled a lot and taught for her basically a barefoot training class. Benefits of barefoot stimulation. You know, plantar skin, we know, is so highly dense with small nerve sensory endings and receptors and mechanoreceptors and all that. And, you know, you get your bare feet on a surface, especially if it's textured, and your brain is immediately going to get input. So additional input comes in, and basically you should be having information sent out to help you stabilize better. But we also get into the thing about like anticipatory responses. Once you're used to a certain surface and its density, your body, your brain expects that. You don't have to think about it usually. But you would have to think on the, well, in Mexico, I don't know, Laura, you weren't with me, but the thing where you have reflexive stability, where you're on a surface and all of a sudden, like I stepped off a curb because I was looking the other way. Thankfully, I have good reflexive stability and I didn't go down, but my body anticipated the same height, the same concrete, and not the mud down below 8 inches. It was all soft and slippery. But that idea of training on 2 different surfaces, you just opened my mind there. What a great idea that is. I can't wait to try it.
Think of your clients. So when you start, I almost say I'm a detective sometimes, because people use the word balance so broadly. I want to improve my balance, Erica. I'm here to see you for balance. I'm like, okay, balance. This is my biggest pet peeve. I tell all the students that I work with, I work at the university, do not tell me your goal is to improve balance. I want to know what in everyday life do you want to work on that needs balance? Is it, I have one client who told me every time she goes to her her family's house, they have a very dense, big, plush rug. So switching from that hard floor to that rug is really difficult. Once he's on that rug, he's okay, but it's that transition. So once you start asking these questions of like, is there a certain environment? So I actually made like a whole playbook and a questionnaire for people to ask. Is it, is it in the environment? Do you feel like you're in tight spaces or crowded areas? Is it more you're afraid someone's going to bump into you, or is it more that you have to go around somebody? If someone says in crowded areas, is it lighting areas? Do you feel like a busy area like Costco gets you because there's so much coming in versus is it more every time? I had one client who told me every time he had to go to the bathroom or he was at the movie theater, he finally realized he had to go to the bathroom and he didn't want to get up because it was a slant. So this is all vestibular system. He had to go down this, the slant to go there and in the dark. And he felt like he was just going to fall forward because he couldn't reference gravity to keep his body upright.
Oh yeah.
He was referencing the ground and felt like he was going. So once you start figuring out that all those different surfaces and stuff, then you'll start understanding what kind of exercises that will match that person's goal and they'll get better a lot faster.
Wow, that's great, man. Gosh, I have this huge questionnaire I do, but I didn't think about that. I just see, that's why I love talking with people, because it's always, there's so much to learn, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you here, is to share with everybody, because there's so much to learn, and Erica's got a lot of great stuff. Like these are things that aren't talking points normally, so I'm going to just go off on a limb here. I'm sorry, it's in my first book. I'm not here to promote myself, but I'm going to say in this book, I do talk about the value of our neurology community, our medical community, and physical therapists. However, unfortunately, and I'm sorry if I offend anyone, but occasionally I do, but it's not because I have no lack of respect. It's just that I feel that the therapy community in general isn't looking deep enough into these other systems. They're not looking into vision and vestibular. I don't know how it is where you are, but in my travels, unless I go to Europe, that's about the only place they're really digging in deep. Netherlands is a great place. Europe in general, I felt so intimidated when I got there the first time. So I have no business being here, but fortunately I was able to teach and it was fine. But I applaud what you're doing, because these are things that that's why I have you here. We need to be looking into these systems and how this is a whole body experience when we're balancing and moving. It's a whole body thing.
I totally agree. And I think the neuro community is so small when you start really, or any specialty, right? You start realizing and meeting people, from Australia, I know, wherever you're are really into learning. So just like any specialty, I think when you find that niche and like here in Denver, I know some therapists who are fabulous therapists who are lifelong learners. Yeah. They take every course, they know their stuff, and I refer them to, and this is one thing that even having this Balance Matters, having a product, learning from what people are doing all around the country. I'm learning all these nonprofit organizations that are just such like rich, like these people are doing such wonderful things that now I'm able to connect people. It was a goal of mine, and connecting either clients to go, this therapist knows what they're doing, this therapist, is understanding it, because everybody has different specialties. Some people don't want to know all this. They want to work more musculoskeletal or not look at the whole, everyone has their own little niche. For me, I was very lucky that I understand the neuro piece. If somebody had a complex neck problem and I couldn't work on that, I would refer them to my friend who understood the neck and understood how to do all the mobilizations and work together. So I think once you have that good team, then I think it's good, because there's some therapists here that I'm working at a clinic right now and I learn every time something from her. So I think once you find who to connect with that can make your client the best. But no, I think there are some people looking at this, that I know some therapists that I learn every time I read their papers, or, in the university, some of the professors I work with.
Well, you have a really nice way of saying that's really much more nicer than what I said. And you actually made me think that there is a time and a place on a call for each thing that people are doing. I mean, it just depends upon the person and what their needs are.
And some people don't have the resources. No, but I think sometimes, Carl, some people don't. If you're in a certain area, like I was very, very lucky to have extremely good mentors over my career. I worked at New York Presbyterian, where we were given actual, I forget how many hours of continuing education days and money to take courses. And I met with a senior therapist once a month or once a week, I don't remember, to go over cases, to go over techniques. I always had somebody I always worked where somebody was smarter than I was to help me grow. I still do that. I reach out. Half of my mentors are semi-retired, but I call them when I have a difficult case, or now I'm meeting people from all around the world that I can be like, oh, I don't get this. Can I talk to this person? Because everyone has their own expertise of where we come from. So if we can all work together, it would be neat,
Absolutely. Because I mean, you just have such a great way of saying things. I think that let's build upon what you said. Building a team is really important. I also feel that no matter who it is, I'll clarify this too, it doesn't matter who it is, I can learn things. So that's a given. It doesn't matter if it's something I like or not. It doesn't matter if it's relevant or not. I can learn. Maybe it's what not to do sometimes. Usually it's something to do. But the other thing too is referring out is so important for the client or patient's best interest. And I think that team building thing is one of the most valuable or invaluable things we can possibly do for the population who's coming to us for help. And I guess my comment would probably be to make sure that people, maybe professionals out there, think about that. If you're able to serve the best for each person or each problem, because I know that I can't, so I just do what I can, and then I send the rest down the street or down the other street.
But I think if we all work together on and figuring out, because unfortunately our healthcare system is just, overrun with time, and how much time do you have with your client? That's why wellness centers, I think, are so important, so people can have more opportunities or different programs, so I think I told you one program I'm really starting to get vested for, hopefully this year, is an intergenerational program. So not everybody likes the same type of exercise. Like I have some clients who would, do one type of exercise, will follow every kind of program, any exercise I tell them, because they know that that is the best for them, or they'll tell me what they like to do. Maybe it's dancing, maybe it's boxing. But then there's other people who, I joke around with my dad. If I told him to do an exercise, he might do it for a little bit, but if I told him to play a game with my children and pretend, and he was silly and like marching like an elephant, or, then he would do that exercise with them because he likes having fun with my kids. So, what drives us to move and do different things, and I think is something I'm looking into more, and having different options for that movement, for balance opportunities and exercise, rather than saying everybody needs to do this,
that's one thing I learned quite a while ago, is they're not going to do what they don't want to do. So let's find things they like and then give them options of those things, and they might even have suggestions. I want to do something like this or something like that.
Autonomy is so important.
Pardon me?
Autonomy is so important, to give someone choices and decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go back. I just want to touch a little bit more on this training on two different surfaces. So now in the step and connect mat, you do have different surfaces, right? Because you have the textured.
Yeah, and I don't have it here with so manufacturing, we're still waiting. Things have changed during COVID, but we have a grass foot pad, and I would have to go to the other room. And I also have like different, if you look on my website, like they look like sunflowers in different textures with different colors.
I've seen those.
So I started adding colors, and I know that is still looking down, but then adding, I love the Clock Yourself app. I don't know if you use that much. The
I don't even know about that.
Oh,
Thank
it's
you.
wonderful. So
I
I would look it up. She did wonderful work. So I do a lot of exercises with it because it has that time component to it. So if somebody is stepping to blue or to yellow or jumping, they can, so if you think about it, if I know what I'm moving to, right, automatic, like I could prepare to say, I'm going to step here, versus if I say quickly, step right, step left, step forward, step, or step to 2 o'clock, to 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and I keep switching it, and then I can change that speed. You can actually add that component. So the colors that I picked are those primary colors that you can step to different colors, different textures, doing just stepping from one surface. So I use the clickers. So the speed of your transfer. So when we look at the spatial and the temporal movements of switching positions. So if I, right now, this is 6, 12, 18, 24. So if I did a 24-inch step length, which is about normal for like the average height. So I look at like the length of someone's legs, and I calculate that. I have measurements for people to look at what is your step length. But if you can hear the clicker goes off when I put weight off of it, and the clicker goes off when you put weight on it. So it activates two different ways. So I might cue someone, instead of saying move fast, I want to hear the clicker go off as fast as you can, step onto here, then you have to find that clicker to step back.
Beautiful.
So if I go slow and say, ooh, I'm on a new surface, okay, now I can figure this out. That, and this shows in the research for Parkinson's, is a little easier than if you have to work, and there I took a bigger step, and this the clickers here, to take this fast step. So my exercise might be fast step, make sure you're stable, because sometimes people are still losing their balance and they just kind of do this. This would be not optimal. So I'll say here, hold for 5 seconds, and then come back. And then eventually I would have them do it eyes closed and keep adding those progressions. Or maybe starting somebody, this is hard, so they might want to start with just a small step. Once they get comfortable, hey, you're doing great. Let's go a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further. So you can keep switching it based on that progression, and tell someone you're really stable at an 18-inch step. When you take a 24-inch step, that's when you start losing your balance backwards. That's what we need to work on. So they start understanding. Same with stepping over obstacles. You can put another foam pad here and have them step over. You can make it go up. Tons of different ways.
See, that's really, so that could even, I'm just kind of randomly thinking here, that could even be like an assessment tool, right? I mean, you can use this to figure out where their weakness or where they start to have the problem or the challenge.
Yeah, and there's so in my course and in different things, I teach some assessments that you can use with the so one of them, and I would love a researcher look at this at Parkinson's, is it's called your forward self-affordance. I think it's a long name, but it's basically looking at, the maximal step length test is how big of a step I could take forward and come back, right? But if you think about it, I'm going to move this for a minute. So I train people, when you're working on an equilibrium strategy, to be able to take a big step and return to center is different than gait mechanics. And I make that very clear, so the clinician or the client working on it has to understand what they're working on. So for instance, if I'm working on gait, I want to take, if I'm taking a step, say I'm on another foot pad here, and I step forward, I'm working on that push off, I'm working on my hips forward. I might even put a laser in their chest to give them that trunk extension or rotation, is different than this.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So this is good. If I'm losing my balance, I take a big step, I catch myself, and I come back. If I can't take a big step, I'm going to keep going, right? Versus this is giving me the mechanics of the rhythm of 1, 2 versus hearing this, is different than this rock. So I usually say, you're gonna hear click, click, rock, and then come back. So you're getting used to the gait mechanics. So there's different ways to train whatever you're working on, but I do both. So I have somebody work on their maximal step length with the knee bent. And then I tell them, now tell me first how far. So this is the test. You basically turn them the other way or put them here, take the mat away so they don't see it. And I put a little, like a Post-it and say, how far can you step? What do you think? And they might tell you either further or closer than they can step. And then you actually measure and see how far they can step. So I have like a whole tutorial on how to do it and what the norms are for that. So are they actually thinking they could step further, which might put them at risk because say you're in Colorado and you're trying to go on a stepping stone and you think you could take a big step, but you can't. That's going to be increase your risk for falls. Or maybe you don't think you can, but you actually can. That's going to be a problem too. So you want your perception to match how much you can
Yeah,
step.
I mean, we see it both ways, right? And yeah, it's interesting. So actually, I'd like to talk about, first of all, I think you said the Clock Yourself app, right? I
Yeah,
don't know if you can
sure.
see it. I have a virtual background. Looks like
Yep,
this.
I'll put it on for a minute. So if you,
It's $1.99. That's it.
yep, it is
I'll buy it.
wonderful.
Buying it right
And
now.
she does amazing work. So here would be your numbers. So I think I've shown some exercises I've done with it. So like you can hit like the target. So I'll put the targets on different positions, and then you can change the speed. So this would be, and then if I want her to go faster,
4, 5.
so I can go faster with that too.
7.
Oh, wow.
8.
Well, I got it now. I'm going to use it. I have to study it.
Yeah,
But
so-
whoa, this looks amazing.
But you could try, actually, what I've done is when someone steps, to make it more fun, and then you can go to speed, every time I hear an even number, step with your right foot. Every time you hear an odd number, oops, I'm gonna, every time you hear an odd number, you're gonna step with your left foot. So you can switch and change and be pretty creative to work on that speed. So now they have to take a bigger step and hit a target.
So you have, in a sense, you kind of have some reactive training because you're having to make a decision, like decision making of, is it an even, is it an odd? Do I step right? Do I step left? Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. We do a lot of conceptually that type of stuff here, and it's very helpful. But I'm so glad you mentioned this app too. That's fantastic.
Yeah, you can do all kinds of stuff with that. I do that in my health classes a lot too.
That's awesome. So let's talk though. So let's talk about where people can get your product, and you also have courses. Please just tell us how and where. Where do you go for that?
So I'll type in the chat. So you can go to stepandconnect.com.
And that's just how it sounds, folks. It's stepandconnect.com. No spaces, no nothing. Go there.
So if you go there, you can see I have courses. I have the mat, different systems, like you were saying, depending on if you want a home system, a basic clinic system, or the deluxe system, depending on where you're going. That has the bigger systems are more foot pads, more mats, things like that. So if you look at it, and then I also work with some nonprofit and some groups who do more group classes, who get multiple mats and are doing more classes. I'm designing different circuits that people can do.
Oh, that's great.
And then we have we have a Balance Matters certification course for instructors who are starting to teach this. So we had our first one in Kansas City in September at a Parkinsons Wellness Center. That was just fabulous group of creative individuals. And then we have one in Denver in March, and then another one at a Parkinson's center. So the one in Denver, she actually is a chiropractor who specializes in the foot. If you look at Gait Happens, they do amazing work. So we'll be at her clinic. So we'll probably be doing a lot more footwork, looking at how we get the foot activated. There's some other clinicians coming that will be great. And then in California, we'll be at Rogue Physical Therapy and Wellness Center, which is a Parkinson's also center. So that will be in April in Fountain Valley. So the cool part about that class, we just started it, this certification course. This is very new. It just opened the end of last year. And my goal is I'm doing a monthly mentoring session. So every second Monday of the month, clinicians who take the course, I do a closed Facebook group, and then I go live and I answer questions, review articles,
Oh, good.
people share exercises. So it'll be a fun kind of network that we can continue to learn different ways, because I learned some new exercises from people different ways.
Yeah.
And then we have this, and I'm going to send this for your grandchildren. So this is the book that we have. Yep. So I wrote this for the intergenerational program, but then COVID hit. But this, it kind of shows you, all the sensory systems. So owls, for instance, they don't move their eyeballs. I don't know if you knew this, but that's why they turn their head so much. So I'll sometimes joke around with my patients. I'm like, you are not an owl. You can move your eyes. So let's move our eyes. Now let's be like an owl. And talking about trying to turn around a chair without moving your eyes is really hard. So we do like a lot of fun stuff.
I didn't know that about owls.
Yeah, and even the cheetah has a highly specialized vestibular system. So it's a fun way to teach about the balance systems. And then there's like addendum at the back of different activities to do. So this will be coming soon. The book is out, but you can, the program will be coming out hopefully at the middle of next year.
So I have two granddaughters and another grandchild on the way. And I think that they're a little too young now, but I'm getting it because I want them to learn this stuff. Oh,
my daughters, I have a 7 and 9-year-old. They can tell you probably more about the balance systems than most kids their age.
I'm sure.
They'll be able to tell you about their vestibular system. And
it's great though. It's great. Yeah, we're super excited to get our system here. We bought the deluxe. I'm just so happy that you put this out there and you're doing this great work. Any questions from anybody? I think we had one question here, but I lost it. Let's see. Question: what kind of exercises can help if the PD person has rigidity in his or her hips and it's difficult to walk? Any thoughts on that you have?
So for rigidity, I usually recommend like a lot more alternating kind of movements so that your muscles don't have a chance. So I don't have people hold a pose, so doing a lot of, leg swings, moving back and forth, doing a lot of alternating type of motions for that rigidity to, so that, because if a rigidity is your muscles on both sides are contracting, right? And then you can't move. So doing qigong, like a lot of kind of that type of motion. So I do a lot of the rocking back and forth on the clickers, all that kind of motion to get them out of that. I also look a little bit, because I look so much at the balance systems. If you look at older adults, older adults tend to co-contract at the ankles when they're less stable. They also look at the trunk. So when I watch people who have balance problems, they tend to tighten up everywhere to stabilize themselves. So they'll start using all their somatosensory or their joint reference to stabilize. So I'll have them either pass a ball hand to hand and try to relax the trunk to make them adapt. So I would have the person check out their balance also to make sure that they're not getting more rigid to stabilize themselves to use their joint references, is also another aspect that I look at.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. And I'm listening, also just looking to see what else we have here. Yeah, very cool. Anne, hi. It's good to see you here, Anne. Lorgio, Senor Lorgio. Okay, so we also talk about Senor, I'll send you a note with a link to Erica's website. I think that's all we have for questions. He's watching on Facebook. So actually, I should put that in. I will type that though in a while. We'll be posting this interview later today. It'll go up on YouTube and all these audio platforms as well. And speaking of that, folks, if you're listening on iTunes or Buzzsprout or Spotify or wherever, and it's no video, jump over to the Carl Sterling, that's Carl with a K, carlsterling.net. And later today, this will be at the top of the list of new interviews. And then you can watch to see some of the visuals that were done during this interview with Erica.
And I'm happy if anyone, the one thing that I do take pride in is, I invented this and, learned about the manufacturing world. We actually have it all produced here in Denver. But yeah, so that's a whole new world to me, but I'm a clinician at heart. So I love the clinical support and here to help people with exercises and keep updated on the research and things like that. So if people have questions, please, you can email me even at Erica or at info@stepandconnect.com.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy, but I also appreciate so much the work that you're doing and all the passion you put into this and all the thought, and you're bringing together all these different aspects of movement that in a unique way that I've never seen done before. And I'm really grateful for all you do. Thank you.
No, and thank you for your openness and open mind for, supporting new entrepreneurs and, new thoughts and being that thought leader of new ideas. So I appreciate just having the opportunity of sharing some of these ideas with you.
Well, I mean, it's my pleasure. It's one of the things I joke around when we do a live workshop or Zoom or whatever, is I guarantee it's usually a 2-day event. The tomorrow night part of my intro is I'm going to walk out of here learning more than any of you, because there's all of you and there's just one of me. And you take all this experience and knowledge, and I'm not sure if I ever actually had an original idea. Although I might have had one the other day, but I'm sure someone else has thought of it. But it's just, I think we need to work together. We need to learn from each other. And I want to share good work like you're doing. And I want people to know, I want them to go on, invest in this. And, if it's not right now, we'll save for it and down the road, invest in it, because it's going to be, I know it's a game changer. So you'll be seeing a lot of postings and you'll be getting tagged a lot. Hope you don't mind.
No, I definitely don't mind. As a small business owner, to share that's the biggest compliment. So I thank you.
Well, thanks everyone for watching on Facebook and here on Zoom. Thank you again, Erica. You and I will be in touch soon. Really appreciate all you do. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Don't hang up. We'll continue talking for just a minute afterwards, but thank you again. Have a happy new year, everyone. Have a fantastic day.
Thanks.
Figure out.